Yeah, the concept of social pain. This is a neuroscience concept. And for those of you who are doing roots and seeds, or seeds, the neuroscientists have been following us around for ages. There's a study happening now out of Seattle, University of Washington. There's a neuroscience lab there. And Dr. Andy Meltzoff, who is one of the leading neuroscientists and one of the first in the field, who was on Time magazine, I think, I don't know, maybe 30 years ago, as the first person to demonstrate and to understand that when you stick your tongue out at a baby, hours old, the baby can model back. And he and his wife, Patricia Kuhl, who I think has done one of the best TED Talks I've ever heard, she works with the very early development of language and communication with infants. So they're doing a study of brain scans on children who have seeds of empathy, children who have roots of empathy, 5-year-olds and 8-year-olds, as compared to little children matched who don't have it, because they believe that the little children's brains have changed because of seeds of roots. So, you know, when they first suggested this, I was horrified. I said, you're not putting caps on the children, I'm sorry. No glue, no caps. But they have a new way of doing it. And the iLab's seen as really very sophisticated. It's like the old-fashioned hair dryers you see in movies, you know, in the 50s. Some of us are actually around. But the idea is the children sit very comfortably in a childlike chair, and they do all kinds of things, and they, without touching the child, they can see the zones of the brain that light up. And, I mean, we'll be another year before we get the results, but because there's research that shows that children's levels of aggression go down dramatically with both roots and with seeds, and that their social emotional understanding goes up, the thesis is that when behavior has changed without any other, any other program to reinforce after the children have had, particularly roots of empathy, when behavior stays changed, the brains have changed. So there was one study that happened for the government of Manitoba did, and they did this randomized longitudinal study, really rigorous, followed children in each grade level for 3 years after they've had the program, and found, which is incredible actually, that 3 years after having the program, whether you were in high school or now in grade 3, that aggression stayed down. We just don't know any other way than to understand the children changed themselves, that the experience around the green or the lavender blanket was biologically embedded. So when you think about social pain, we are talking about the biological embedding of experience. So when our feelings are deeply hurt, or when we grieve, and we can grieve about the loss of life or the loss of love. We can grieve about many things, the loss of possibility. You know, people always think that when someone has a miscarriage, oh, you'll have another one, blah, blah, blah. Completely deny the grief process. It's the loss of a dream. When you're having a baby, you're having a dream. And also, babies who are born with big challenges. The parent has to reconstruct the dream. So all of those experiences, plus the cruelty of bullying, when you've been made to feel so low and so worthless and so helpless, and we're so crushed inside. When I speak to adults in middle management, I don't do it anymore, but middle management was always very interested in having me speak to them, because they realized that the absence of empathy was doing more to destroy the impact of their business than any other feature. It wouldn't allow them to have a successful team if they didn't have empathy. How can you get your guys to work together? So it's not about going out and having a shared experience of threat and fear and adventure and climbing a mountain and paying a fortune, hoping they'll bond. It's about empathy. So, but any time, you know, I addressed the blue suits, and there were women in the blue suits too, but it's predominantly men. And I asked them to share an experience from their childhood when they were bullied. Do you know that we have tears? Because the recounting of that experience puts them emotionally back at being 7 or 8 years old and feeling so helpless and so hurt. So social pain is the brain registering that memory in the physical pain center of the brain. So for those of you who said you were parents, the memory of childbirth and labor you can talk about, but when you talk about it, the pain center in your brain does not light up. But when you talk about the loss of a child, the pain center in your brain explodes because it registers the emotional pain in the physical center of pain in your brain. All to say, sticks and stones may break my bones and names will always hurt me. So the name calling that little children do is not okay. It's absolutely not okay. It's not a typical rites of passage of childhood. It's hurtful. You know? We say to the children, look both ways before you cross the street, because you could get hurt. Well, let's look both ways. Let's make way for ducklings. You know that Robert McCloskey book going back 1938? Make way for ducklings. Meaning, stop the traffic. There's a family of ducklings about to cross the street. And if a society is a society that cares about childhood, we will eliminate all the things that can hurt children. Bullying can hurt children. So I don't think bullying is that prevalent in the traditional definition of bullying. I think cruelty and unkindness is everywhere. And I think we have to draw the curtain on it. But I think the traditional definition of bullying is not necessarily prevalent in your centers. But without question, there are every single day, there are times where you need to intervene and say it's not okay to call names. It's not okay to say to Susie, you can't sit there. That happens every day. And it doesn't mean that the child is being vicious, but I can tell you, in terms of repeated negative actions, very often you will have a child who will repeatedly exclude another child. And that is not okay. And you can do something about it without humiliating the child who's being excluded. Can you imagine in a social setting, you know, say if you were going bowling and somebody said, she can't be on my team, what we would feel like? Would you be able to throw the ball down the alley? I don't think so. You'd be so devastated. There's no difference. You know, people, when I first started this empathy work a long time ago, it was because I had worked so much with domestic violence and child abuse and neglect. The common denominator in all of that suffering meted out to the children was the absence of empathy in the adults. They just didn't understand that the partner they were beating up, they couldn't understand how the partner felt. They knew that they were physically hurting, but they didn't get how the partner felt in any area at all. And the babies that were shaken to death, or shaken blind, or shaken paralyzed, or shaken into such cranial bleeds that they had profound learning disabilities. People who did that, it was because the baby wouldn't stop crying pretty well all the time. Those of you who do seeds and roots know a crying baby is not a baby, but a baby with a problem. Every child in your Roots of Empathy program is really prepared to understand that a baby has feelings. It's not just cold, tired, wet, hungry, or sick. Because people who shake babies to death think the baby has no business to be crying. I'm a good parent. The baby isn't wet, isn't cold, isn't tired, isn't hungry. No business crying, making me a bad parent. So to understand that an infant has feelings is to protect babies forever. And your children understand that. And that is the big thing when I say the absence of empathy, the two components that I spoke about. Perspective taking, to be able to understand what your 3-year-olds are learning, that other people think. You don't have to nod on the phone, mommy can't see it. And the idea that the affective side of empathy is our emotions, and that's who we are. And you know what? That's a big script to learn. And if we just can help our children in our early settings understand how they feel so that they can imagine how the other person feels, that will be the answer to how we deal with bullying-like behaviors.